Polling in May of 2011, it was, you know, the headline, slam dunk. Everyone wants photo ID, 80%. Honestly, I think that was way overblown. I think it was, I might have, well, I wouldn't have, but, you know, a lot of people got called totally out of context, you know, 600 sample size, which they extrapolate. I think that's really exceedingly low for polling. But as it is, you know, it was polling really high, but we hadn't engaged in the game yet. And so a lot of it, and another lesson I think is one of risk. Like, we have to be bold and believe in something that we believe in, and not, you know, and kind of damn the torpedoes in some respects. I mean, I'm maybe less idealistic than you are. I do have some dose of pragmatism, but I also think that when something's wrong, it's wrong, and you fight it. Because otherwise, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I know there were a lot of people early on, and then that galvanized others that felt the same way, with some early people jumping in and organizations that jumped in. But like, for a lot of populations, the populations that stood up and said no, this was not risky to stand up and work against this harmful amendment. You know, it was essential, because otherwise it's gonna pass, and then where are we gonna be? And so, like, I never understood this whole, like, well, it probably can't pass, or it's probably gonna pass, and we can't spend time and money on it. Like, that just to me did not make any sense. So I don't even remember the question now.
No. It was what's the margin? So what's the 5 points?
I think part of what would help make this happen, or do more of this, is if we keep on telling the truth. So the amendment, when it was a piece of legislation and it got vetoed, it did say that tribal IDs would not be accepted. How in the world does a person today write a piece of legislation that disenfranchises indigenous people in this state? How can they, with supposedly some form of intelligence, walk to the Capitol each day to do their work with a piece of legislation like that in their hand? And how did I not know about that? So we need to be listening, we need to be telling the truth. I was told by Beth Newkirk, who's the executive director at the Organizer Apprenticeship Project, she was on a panel a couple weeks ago talking about this issue, and talked about the Voices for Voting Rights work, and there was a woman on from the League of Women Voters there too. And something that Beth said compelled this person from the League of Women Voters to share this story about how there's new citizens, there's people gaining their rights to citizenship across the state all the time, every day. And the League of Women Voters goes to all of these ceremonies to register new voters. And that's a story that they haven't felt like they could tell, because they were worried. They were worried for the same reasons why people didn't want us to talk about race with the voter ID amendment, or they didn't want us to talk about excluding people, because some voters didn't want to hear that. So I think that if we continue to tell the truth, be more risky, then we'll have a better chance at doing what you're talking about and what you're describing, because there's people doing good work, but we need to tell the truth.
There's another piece. No, this is good. There's another piece to this too about how young people are being engaged, and I know that this was a big part of your education, was being involved in campaigns back a number of years ago when we were students together. So maybe talk about that for just a minute, and then I saw a hand over there and then over there. So
sure. I mean, so one of the things about these amendments, so if you think about the cynical mindset that put these on the ballot, so the young people were, I feel like, the young people were the people that defeated these two amendments. And if you look at the numbers, there were more people who voted on these two amendments than voted for the president. And so if you think about, like, so then what does that tell us about moving forward? So now we're getting all wonky and we're going to start talking about the policies at the Capitol. And I think that people are smart and know, like, they can understand that, but really we have to make sure that we're doing good organizing work, and we're bringing people along and actually having them inform the different policy decisions that we're making, and that it feels relevant to a lot of people in Minnesota, because that is the danger, right? That it becomes that thing at the Capitol that's really like kind of wonky and doesn't actually, like, there's no way that we're actually doing the good organizing work to get people's voices at the Capitol and getting people at the Capitol and putting the resources toward that, because that's how we win. That's how we continue this win. And the piece that was, I think, hard during the election was that there weren't a lot of groups that came out against both amendments. So I just have to put that out there. There weren't that many groups that came out against both. And there's many reasons why. There's many good, really good reasons around funding. There's really good reasons around you need to focus your work. But also, that also is, I think, some healing we have to do.
So maybe the question, how do we change it? I mean, you know, because again, I think what I really heard you say, it's going to have to change. We know the demographics are our destiny, and we know that in the next 20 years, at least the 7-county metro area is going to be a majority communities of color, and that actually has a different sort of look to Minnesota than where I grew up here in Minnesota, so a few decades ago. So how will both the organizing community change, and what might it mean for the work that you guys are doing?
So, I mean, I think the answers are yes and yes. They have to change. I do believe they will and are changing. I believe it's been slow, probably too slow. Again, like I said, I think these 2 amendments and the work that everyone collectively did is the beginning, and I want to, you know, like build on that, and so it's not now we've done it or we, you know, whatever. I'm in the communication side of an community organizing culture. I mean, I think it starts with basics. I think it starts by reaching out. I think it starts by listening. I think it starts by building that relationship and then sharing with each other what can work and what others need to work. And so it's not one person telling another this is what needs to happen, but it's by like a collective conversation of building something. And again, I'm not a trained organizer. That is not like my role. But I see that in the people that I work with and the people that I have built relationships with, both in my organization and around the state. I've seen that with this campaign of having to actually trust each other. I think a lot of it starts with that, with having to say, I don't know something. I need to learn from you, this other organization or this other person, and you have to say that to begin with yourself. You have to say, you know, I'm a white woman who's 40-some years old, and I grew up a certain way, but I can learn from you, and we can build a relationship. And I do think it really starts with some of those basics. And I think, you know, a lot of the media stuff has absolutely got to change, because it's so far behind, I think, where some of the organizing's at. But unfortunately, it's going to limit some of that if we can't change that too.
Any other thoughts from the panelists before we move on?
I wanted was your question about how do we get more leaders of color in leadership in racial justice organizations? Okay. I think that white executive directors have to step down. I think that has to be part of the game plan, to be quite frank. I think that has to be the vision for the work, and that you have to, as an organizer, the best organizers are always bringing leaders with them and are always developing leaders, and know that the struggle is eternal. And that you have to, that's what you got to do. You got to be getting the right people involved, where that's the next step, is that a person of color should lead those organizations.
Well, I want to follow up more on that in a minute, but there's also some other questions here, because there's a great opportunity generationally, because we have a demographic shift now where nonprofits are actually turning over in mass, both the leadership, and so there's an opportunity. But I don't want to get off on my conversation too much. I want to hear from these other guys, and then gals and people.
Can I say one other thing though?
Okay.
Some of my best allies and most powerful teachers have been white executive directors. I just think that's the vision for the movement. Okay, so just hold both.
You know, it's interesting, when we were doing the Democracy Fund in John could probably speak to it, one of the things that we saw this inherent tension between the transformative nature and the relational nature of organizing, of community organizing, and the transactional nature, or the, you know, just voting that happens with elections. And then also some of these other things that we talked about. And we saw this as a great opportunity to kind of help support and marry the two. And one of the things that I feel really good about is just seeing how much has come over the last number of years. So I think there's another takeaway for me is a lot happens in this place of tension. A lot happens in these places where elections are an opportunity where things get cut very cleanly. It's either this or that, where things can get fuzzy and stay nebulous for a while. So while it's good and bad, there's some really good opportunities, providing we're willing to do the work and ask the hard questions, raise up issues that we're all uncomfortable with. To be honest, you know, racism in Minnesota is something that I've been shocked at how uncomfortable people are to talk about it. But it's here, and there's you know, as anything, we can get through it if we talk about it.